Welcome to a special edition of Stories of Brisco and Bradshaw. I would be JBL Bradshaw as always, and joined with my WWE Hall of Fame partner, Mr. Gerald Brisco, and we got one of the great frontmen of one of the great rock bands of our generation. He was a founder and original of the Outlaws and the Blackhawks, and now he's got a book out that I am so jealous of the freaking title. I want to steal it. The Last Outlaw. He is Mr. Henry Paul. Henry, welcome to the show.
Good to see you, John. You too there, Jerry.
I'm
Well,
so
thank
jealous of the
you.
name The Last Outlaw. Just Stan Hansen, the old wrestler, used to always had that, and I always wanted to steal it from him. And then Jeff Jarrett stole it first, and now you've got it on your book, and so now I can't use it. So I'm
Oh.
jealous of the name. It's just the greatest name.
I'm sorry.
It's just the best name, The Last Outlaw. It's
Well,
just
you know, and
great phrase.
it applies. All the guys from my generation, my peer group, they're gone, all of them, and you don't know. It's hard to see, when you look down the road, what it's going to be like, and when you look around and everyone's gone, there's a certain sort of sadness to it that you couldn't have these friends that you realized a dream come true with, and that you shared stages with and lives with in your life's work, that you couldn't, continue to be friends and spend time together and play together. And it's sort of sad, but yeah, it's kind of like the wrestling game too.
Yeah.
The guys that played that game, they got out early, a lot of them, and
Mhm.
it's just tough. I don't know. The entertainment business is tough.
Yeah, it takes a big toll on you. And, I doing the research on you, Henry. I know you lived here in Tampa for a long time, where I lived there, but I didn't know you were a New York boy. But we were talking wrestling before, the great Gordon Soley, Dusty Rhodes, and all those guys. I was from that era. There were Buddy Cope, Dusty Rhodes, and Gordon Soley. And I was looking. Every once in a while, somebody else on the line will send you a wrestling card. You go down that wrestling card, man, like you say, we're the last outlaws then. On them. And
Exactly.
it's really a sad thing. You look at, well, there's a segment that early lad, Buddy Rogers, and Jerry Brisco. All those guys are going against the assassins and another guy. And all those guys are gone. 5 out of 6 are gone, man. You just wow, where'd the time go? I imagine it's the same. You look at a card that you played on, years ago, and man, a lot of musicians are gone. You can't communicate with them anymore.
Well, and I was watching the Leonard Skinner, who I'm in Calgary, Canada tonight with Leonard Skinner. And I was watching the film, the most recent film made on them, a documentary, and you watched all the excess and the just the medication and I was a part of it, but it was so pervasive and so seemingly necessary to get yourself into a place where you could go out there and win over a crowd that didn't know who you were, or try and blow the headliner off the stage. And it was mostly, for me, it was alcohol, but I mean, marijuana, LSD. When the cocaine hit the table, it got ugly in a hurry. And lucky for me, I wasn't much up on that. I kind of pushed back from that, but it's watching that film of Skinner, was sad in a way, because all those guys were so talented and they worked so hard, and they went away so soon, and it just seems sort of, it's a sad sort of part of that story.
It certainly is. We just had the Van Zants on about a couple of months ago on this podcast here, and they were gracious. We talked a lot about the Jacksonville scene and all that. But the music scene in Tampa was phenomenal back in those days. Tell us a little bit about your history, Henry. You moved down from New York to Temple Terrace, Florida, and you got into music there, or what was the progression?
Well, I moved to Florida in '57. I'm actually moved to Lakeland, and we moved to Tampa in '61. We moved to Temple Terrace, and I went to Sly Junior High. I went to Greco Junior High School. I went to high school in New York for a year and a half and came back and graduated from King. that whole time, the backdrop was exceptionally a high level of musicianship and just a uncountable number of really good bands that dotted the landscape of Tampa. So competitive and so professional. And the band, the Romans, were sort of at the king of the heat. And they got a recording contract and they cut a single, and we were so enamored by them. And this was before I even formed a group or did anything in the pop music business. I was a kind of a folk music artist, and I used to hitchhike over to Pinellas Park during my high school years and play at a coffee house over there called Boards. And I just loved going over there, and I would sit on a stool in front of 30 or 40 people and play my songs. And wound up moving to New York City like Bob Dylan, and I wanted to pursue music, and I had made a decision to do that. I mean, before that, I went to junior college and that was a bust. And then I St. Pete JC, and I worked for Jim Walter for a while in the mailroom over in the big high rise on Dale Mabry. And
Right. Yeah.
I wound up uh, on the ground floor of Wolf Brothers downtown as a clothing salesperson. And they asked me to be the sort of the model in their print ads in the Tribune. So I would every week I'd go and they'd take pictures of me wearing this stuff, and they put it in the paper. And I loved working at Wolf Brothers. It was fun. Just the attention you got, and just it was a really clean cut kind of really, I don't know, hoity-toity gig, and I dug that. But at one point, I mean, I knew I wasn't going to do that. I packed up my stuff and moved to New York and started playing in folk clubs and put a band together up there because the country rock thing had really taken off, and I just loved that. I always loved country music, and so that started to come together. I mean, Epic, one of the people from Columbia came downtown and saw me and brought me up to meet Don Ellis, who was the head of A&R at Epic, and he put me in the studio and we cut 4, 5, 6 sides. And his suggestion was that I maybe consider moving to Nashville. But I wasn't ready to just pack up and go to Nashville. I wound up. I had a buddy of mine, and this will amuse you in particular, Jerry. But he put a show together at the Fort Homer Hestelry Armory,
Right.
and it was a musical program featuring myself, a guy by the name of Milton Carroll, and a duo called Baldwin and Leps. And these three musical entities had gotten out of Tampa and gone to New York and gotten record deals and were coming back to play for the University of South Florida crowd. And I went out there for my really first show in front of a large audience. It must have been 2,000, 3,000 people in the Armory. And I got over, I mean, it went well. And I knew that I could do that. And so my friend that put that show together invited me to move back to Tampa and bring the band and let him manage it. And so that brought me back to Tampa, and that was the beginning.
Was that the beginning of the Outlaws to form?
That was the beginning of the Outlaws. In other words, Monty Yoho, the original drummer of the Outlaws, was the drummer in my band that I brought down from New York. And when the bass player got homesick and left, Frank O'Keefe joined the group. And when Jim Fish got, kind of disenchanted and things weren't going as well as maybe they could or should have been, he took a leave of absence, and Huey Thomason joined the band. And so then it was Frank and Monty and I and Huey, and we played like 4-piece as Sienna, which was the name of my band, for, I don't know, 6 months, maybe a year. And we changed the name to the Outlaws because they had all been in a band called the Outlaws when they were much younger in high school. And we thought we might get more work. And so Billy Jones moved back from Colorado to join the group. We had a 5-piece group, and that was the band that made good in the national musical scene, and we slugged it out in the clubs and wound up getting a manager and played with Leonard Skinner, and there was a buzz on the band, and we got signed to Clive's label, and our first record came out and did very well, and that was a life-changing, kind of deal.
For sure.
Meeting, go ahead, Jerry. I'm sorry.
No,
Meeting,
go ahead.
meeting with Clive. That had to be a big deal. I mean, that's when you first start meeting with people that are pillars of industries, and when you first
Right.
got to meet with them, you first get a contract. Did you feel like after the Armory, you have this great success with this huge crowd? Now you're meeting with this icon legend. You're like, I'm rolling now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yes. I mean, the truth of the matter is he sent his A&R director, Bob Fiden, down to see the band. We were playing on a bill with Charlie Daniels and Leonard Skinner
Wow.
at the sports stadium or sportatorium in Orlando. What was that
Yeah,
called?
yeah, the Eddie Graham Sports Complex eventually. The Orlando Sports Stadium is what the original
There
name
were
was.
three or 4,000 kids in there on the dirt floor in the metal building, and the Outlaws kicked ass. And
I own that building, by the way, Henry.
is that right?
Yeah, I bought it much later, though. Along with Eddie Graham, my brother, we purchased
But
the
but
building
that night in that little kid,
From Pete Ashlock was the owner. I don't know if you ever
yeah.
met Pete.
Well, that night, the A&R director came down and was knocked out by the band. He went back and said, "Clive, I have found a band for our label." And Clive flew down to Columbus, Georgia. We were playing with Skinner in the Armory there, and he was out in the. We knew he was there, and he came back to the dressing room after the show, and you know, told us that his intention was he was definitely going to sign the band to Arista.
Wow.
Well, I mean, my God, if you ever dreamed of being a recording artist or being on a major label and having a shot at the big time, there it was, and we were all just like, I don't even know how to describe it. It was almost like a surreal moment, of a dream come true that you had worked so hard for.
And it's got to be kind of cool you're in Calgary right now and you're with Leonard Skinner still 50 plus years later. That's a heck of a run.
Well, it is, and there's irony in that because, oh God, it was the 4th of July. I'm trying to remember. It was the 4th of July in 1976 in Memphis at the whatever that big outdoor stadium is called. Um, and it was ZZ Top, Leonard Skinner, and the Outlaws. And we were pretty new. We were out, 6, maybe 8 months out. But we had a pretty good head of steam. And this past year, lo and behold, there it was again. Leonard Skinner,
Wow.
ZZ Top, and the Outlaws. So the more
Wow.
things change, the more they remain the same. And it has been an incredible 50 or 60 year sort of ride.
What is it about music from that era? And I include, I think, the 60s in it as well. That's just so iconic, And I'm not taking shots at the young people today because everybody loves to do that, but I'm not at all. But it's so iconic. You guys are still rocking. And when I say rocking, you're filling up any arenas you put your name on, you're selling out that arena. What incredible. What was it about that era that produced such iconic, great bands?
Well, going back to the music scene in Tampa, the competition between bands, the level of excellence that and professionalism that these bands demonstrated. I mean, Stephen Stills from the Buffalo Springfield and Crosby, Stills and Nash graduated from Plant, was an incredible musical personality in Tampa. Joe Lala was in a band called Blues Image that went to California. And once you establish that level of musicianship at that early sort of stage in your life, I think it had everything to do with where the Beatles were, where all these next generation musical dreamers attached themselves to. They took from where the Beatles introduced a band concept to popular music, and they honed it into these incredible musical groups. And you can use Leonard Skinner, certainly the Allman Brothers, Marshall Tucker. I mean, these are bands in my genre of my peer group, the Outlaws and Charlie Daniels band. But my goodness, I mean, if you go to California and you want to, talk about, well, Linda Ronstadt had this huge run, but I mean, the Eagles, Poco, uh, Loggins and Messina, Seals and Crofts. I mean, it was like one crazy good musical personality after another. John David Souther, Jackson Brown. I mean, the list goes on. James Taylor. So, Bob freaking Dylan, for God's sakes. And so,
Right.
I don't know. The bar was sort of set, and everybody struggled to get up to get to the bar. And I think, people like Carlos Santana, those kinds of Steely Dan, those kinds of bands, the Doobie Brothers, it was amazingly uh, invested musically, and the level of play was hugely high.
We had Pat Boone on recently, and we were talking about legendary performers, and we had John basically the same question: why in music the same? Pat, I thought he had a very astute answer. He said, "There's no more studio musicians. Everything's AI now, and there you can't sit there and jam with each other and get creative like you used to." And is that you feel that's true also?
Well, I feel like, the AI thing, which I don't know a whole lot about, is pretty amazing, pretty scary, and pretty incredible all at once. I mean, it dehumanizes the musical sort of personality of of the spiritual investment that people put in music. There is none of that. And I don't think there's a way to replicate that. So the AI thing is kind of I wouldn't call it a fad, but it's a phase that it will never replace people. I mean, people want to feel, and they need to identify with, and there's no way to identify with what that is. You
Right.
identify with people. I identify with you as a wrestler. I identify with John as this younger, middle-aged, handsome movie star like I.
Don't say that.
I'm just saying that we identify with one
Hey,
another.
Henry, you and I were young, middle-aged, handsome guys too back in our day.
I know that you got your share. Don't worry.
Hey, Henry, you talk about musical styles. So many different cities had different musical styles. What you had in Tampa, what you had in Bill Street in Memphis, what you had in Nashville, the blues in Kansas City, and so on. Did the musical styles come from the culture of the cities, you think, or because a certain band got so popular that other bands that were similar to that band moved in or emulated that band? Which is kind of chicken and egg, I think. Which do you think it was for
Well,
these different cities?
yeah, I would call the Allman Brothers the egg. They had created something, and they created it in the image of a quote unquote Southern band. Before that, there was no such thing as a Southern band. I mean, Elvis was from Memphis, and Steve Alamo was from Miami, and there were a million different places you could be from. But the Allman Brothers seem to have established this idea of a Southern band. And I know for a fact that Charlie Daniels, the Outlaws, Marshall Tucker, not Leonard Skinner quite so much, they were more into the British rock scene. But there were a lot of bands from the South that had name marquee value that that were enormously influenced by the Allman Brothers. And I, when it comes to Tampa, you have that Latin, I mean, chicken and yellow rice and, crab rolls. And I mean, Tampa is a really uniquely soulful city. And so you had all those influences, and, people came to Florida as a better place to be from all these other cities and states that were up north and cold. and they'd come to Florida. And the Florida entertainment scene was very healthy because of all the tourists.
Right.
Every bar had a band. Every band had, a personality. And I don't know. I mean, nowhere, when I was living in New York in high school, the bands up there were average, very average. It was in a small town north of New York, about 90 miles. It wasn't in the city, but the bands were nowhere near as good as the bands in Tampa. And so I just think that really was like the farm system that produced a lot of really significant talent.
You guys had such a cool sound, and when you listen to it, it just feels like a legendary sound. It's just got a great vibe to it. Does that come from all the band members? Does that come from just a couple that are writing it? How does that feel develop? And when you have that feel, do you know what it is? I mean, or is it just you doing what you want to do?
I think that you hit on a lot of what makes it what it is. I think that, in the Outlaws, there were two or three different people that had significantly unique and different music personalities. My contribution was more country rock. Huey, his contribution was a lot of the country rock stuff with me, but he aspired to be something else. He was a very devoted Jimi Hendrix disciple. And he was very fast and fluid in his ability to play. But where he really excelled was in that country rock, that real clean, lightning fast country rock sort of personality. Billy Jones was another songwriter and singer with Huey and I, and he had a very melancholy outlook. He came from a pretty, difficult childhood, and he was damaged sort of in a way. We all were, but it was a little more visible and a little more tangible in him. And his songwriting reflected it. And his playing was very melodic and a beautiful counterpart to Huey's lead guitar work. And then he had, on top of all that, and the songs that he wrote, he sounded like a little bit like Neil Young with that real high falsetto. But it wasn't a falsetto. Billy's voice was really high, and he added that really high harmony voice to Huey's and mine. And so the three of us, that's the luck of being in a band with the right people. And they enhanced one another and complimented one another and pushed one another up the road, competitive within the group itself. And then Frank, the bass player, who didn't get a lot of ink, was an incredible musician. One of the greatest bass players I've ever heard and been lucky enough to play with. And the drummer was rock solid and really appropriate for that musical style. And he was a very bright light of optimism and commitment. And so that band was the luck of the draw. When we all convened in 71 or 72, it was a very lucky day. And we just, you couldn't see it coming. You knew it was in your heart to do, but it wound up being what we dreamed of doing. And even this late date, I'm 76. I can't believe that we did that. I can't believe that we got that lucky.
Yeah. And your band was really guitar driven. Was that by design because of the musicians that you had in the band, or was that just something because of the musicians you had in your band?
Well, I think it's safe to say that the guitar moved in, took over rock music. I mean, everybody was a guitar player. And if you had some really special, gifted, talented musical personalities. I mean, look at Dwayne Allman,
Yeah.
look at Dickie Betts. I mean, that those two people were,
Florida boys.
well, I mean, just crazy, incredibly gifted. I mean, Dwayne was a great band leader, a great slide player. Uh, he ran that band with compassion and commitment. And Dickie was writing in memory of Elizabeth Reed. He found his voice later. Greg was an incredible singer and a great songwriter, a really smart guy. Greg was really smart, like brilliant. And, everything seemed in our genre to trickle down from that. We imitated them, but we had our own thing. The Outlaws sang like the Eagles and played like the Almonds. We had our own three-part harmony, which was very, very tightly crafted and very sophisticated compared to bands like Marshall Tucker that were very powerful with great musicians and songs, but they didn't sing with the finesse and the intricacy of the Outlaws. We sang great together.
Right.
Still do.
When you in wrestling, I've been in it for 30 something years, Mr. Briscoe about 60. You see a few guys in those decades that are just generational talents, and you look at them and go, wow, that guy's just, in my opinion, I look at it and go, he's better than me. He's just good. But there's only two or three every generation, or less when you talk about a couple generations, maybe two or three. Did you have some guys like that in rock where you just look at it and go, that guy is a freaking genius when you saw him?
Well, yes, there are a lot of different components that go into making a band successful. One of my strengths was leadership. I was a good leader. I I could see where we were going, and I helped craft the Outlaws' musical personality around that vision. There were people in the band like Huey that were exceptionally gifted, and and then there was Frank and Billy and Monty. But I mean, Huey, I think, was uniquely gifted. His sense of melody was just beautiful. Um, I was lucky enough to live long enough to get better with age. When I went to Nashville, when I was writing songs and demoing in my home studio, I learned later in my career how to sing better, how to write better. And the last two studio records that I wrote and recorded with the Outlaws are two of the best records we ever made, just because the songwriting is so good and the singing is so good. And you just learn with time if you don't burn out, by being a knucklehead. You just learn how to make records and how to write songs. And I was watching this Motown documentary. You guys probably have seen it. It's incredible about Smokey Robinson learning how to write songs as a young man and becoming a absolutely brilliant songwriter. And I was lucky that way. But having Huey in the band was his and my relationship was, I think, integral to the band's success. And certainly it wouldn't have been anything at all without Billy or without Frank and Monty. So, it's just so much luck goes into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned that your music has progressed, which any a smart person, as you obviously certainly are, you progress in life and get better at what you do, as you're talking about. How has your music changed? What have you learned? I mean, you're this terrific rock legend for 50 plus years in the business, and your book coincides with the release with the first signing of your contract, the book, The Last Outlaw, which is pretty cool. 50 years later, you got this great book coming out. What is the main things that you have learned, and how has your music changed?
Well, early on, you've been pretty far over to pick up the dime. I mean, you want it so bad that you do anything you can to get where you want to go or become who you want to be. but you learn in time, especially with a major label that holds the purse strings and can manipulate your creative effort. I learned a hard lesson about being true to myself. And that comes in the form of musical decision making. And it comes in the form of life choices, like communication with people in a way that you can not be hurtful. You know, if you have something significant to talk to someone about, it's so much better to talk it through. With the Outlaws, we were young and really trying to be somebody, and it was difficult to see that. That was something that you learned later. But I believe that, you know, listening, if you're quick, you could I could help lead the band in a certain sort of direction. Huey could play these incredible musical passages. I could write these songs that people identified with that I knew were commercial in their nature. You know, we weren't writing art rock. We were writing country, you know, green grass and high tides. And it was very, you know, there again, uniquely ours. And I don't know. I just felt like we all brought something different to the table, and it was a great mix of people to see it succeed. But over time, you just, if you continue to work at it, you get better, and that's what I did. I worked at it.
As a band, were you guys very competitive with each other, or was the competitiveness with the band on the card with you?
Well, yeah, there's competition within a group. There's jealousy within the group, you know, of someone else's ability. I always saw everyone in the band for what they were, very important parts to what we were. I also saw the record companies, you know, part in the success. I mean, you would have never heard of bands like the Beatles or, you know, the Rolling Stones had it not been for the major labels that promoted them. I mean, there were a lot of really good bands out there that you never heard of, but those people were in the right place at the right time. And, you know, Mick Jagger is a iconic musical personality who's very, very smart and very, very accomplished businessman. And he makes deals that are in his favor. And he, you know, I know that individually and collectively in the Outlaws, we were all, I think, given whatever it took to make it, you know, to make it in the music business. A lot of people try and do that and they don't make it. But when you see them trying, it's like seeing somebody that doesn't know how to swim in the deep end. You can see that they're not going to get there, you know, and you can see it. And, you know, my advice to a lot of people was know when it's time to get out, because you can spend your entire life pissing up a rope.
There were some really iconic moments in history, especially, you know, with different forms of transportation are becoming prevalent. You know, the Buddy Holly plane crash, Richie Van Zant passing away. You were friends with Richie really well, and in fact, you had one of the last conversations with him was from what I read, right?
Well, yes, we were all very close to one another in that band. The Leonard Skinner band was very instrumental in us being discovered because Ronnie called his manager up and said, "Boy, there's a band from Tampa up here, and they're phenomenal. You need to come and see them." And so, you know, the camaraderie amongst bands from the quote unquote South, and those bands, as I mentioned before, were Tucker and Skinner and Charlie Daniels, the Allman Brothers, and the Outlaws. They were the five bands that I considered my peer group, and we were very close. We we competed fiercely on stage for the audience's affection, but off stage, I learned a lot from Charlie Daniels as a band leader. I learned a lot from Tommy Caldwell in the Marshall Tucker band. He was a great band leader. And if you want people to buy into your view of what we're going to do, you know, it would be leading by example, knowing exactly what, you know, you're talking about, and that you're thought through in your vision and your direction, and you ask people, you know, to do things and to go places, and you know, to believe in your vision of where the band can go. And you know, it was just luck too, again, because my country rock personality got in with Huey, who was from Virginia and a very accomplished bluegrass sort of minded electric guitar player. And we just created this musical personality that was directly in line with everything that was succeeding, so that we were like in the right place at the right time. And that was luck. I mean, it was my country rock influence and his ability to play it and write it and sing it and love it. But it was creating that. We all wore cowboy boots and we all wore cowboy hats, and we, you know, it was just, we just, along with the Marshall Tucker band and Charlie Daniels, we were in the right place with the right racket, and people, you know, we were good, and we could put a whooping on Charlie Daniels.
Yeah, you did. Coming up, Henry, as you're progressing through, you referenced country music. Was there an influence in country music that you really try to pattern yourself out, either your songwriting or your musical style that you really wanted to be like?
Well, I think as a young person, you know, I was deeply attracted to Flatt and Scruggs,
Oh, yeah.
Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs.
Love
They
those
had a
guys.
loved them, and they had a TV show that came on every Saturday afternoon at 5. And I was a religious fan, and I'd watch it every day. And then Johnny Cash and his dark drug,
Yeah.
you know, criminal record and all this darkness. And he had records like Ira Hayes and all these topographical songs.
One of my all-time favorites, by the way.
Yes. And he was inspired me. Merle Haggard came along and I just lost it, because
Yeah.
Merle had actually gone to prison and was a convicted felon, and the greatest musician, singer, songwriter to ever in the history of our, I think, musical history. Merle Haggard
I'm
is
glad
far.
you put musical history instead of classifying country history, because it is musical history.
But yeah, in that genre, I mean, you know, of course you have Hank Williams and Jimmy Rogers, but
Hank
Merle was,
Jr. has Hank Jr. busted on the scene when you guys were.
yeah, well, Hank imitated us.
Yeah.
He was doing a tribute to his dad and playing sort of mainstream country music. And then one day when the Marshall Tucker band really took off and the Ulmer brothers they were having enormous success, and Charlie and the Outlaws and Skinner, he got on the bandwagon and started to sort of image himself in that sort of sociological place that those bands reside. Now he never made records like we did, but he imaged himself in that sort of aggressive country rock sort of personality. And then he wrote, much to his credit, you know, A Country Boy Can Survive,
Right.
Born to Boogie, all these like
Blues man.
unbelievable.
Blues man's my all-time favorite.
Well, and then he was in arenas selling 15, 20,000 tickets a night.
Right.
And Alabama came along, and they were more of a staple Nashville sort of created success story of enormous proportions, whereas Hank was a little bit more self-made.
Right.
Just if you wrote A Country Boy Can't Survive, and you want to spit a little beach nut in that dude's eye,
Shoot him when you're on 45.
you can't touch it.
You had, the Outlaws get together. You got your first contract. You guys were together for about 5 years, 72 to 77. Then you get back together later in the 80s. But in the meantime, you formed Blackhawk and you've done a lot of other things, including having your band of your own name. Are you kind of glad in some way, looking back at your entire career, that you got to do a lot of different things that maybe the band just didn't stay together the entire time because it gave you this opportunity for several different outlets?
But yeah, I mean, it was liberating and very self gratifying to leave the Outlaws and to get a major label deal on Atlantic with a band under my own name and put it together and find success and go back on the road and do what I love to do, rather than leaving the Outlaws and calling it a day and going and selling insurance. And so it took a lot of tenacity and a lot of hard work to pull that off. But I managed to do that. I had some very, very smart and really ambitious people helping me. Going back to the Outlaws in the 80s was just incredible fun. We just had so much fun. I had bought a conversion van from the Ford dealership out there on 92. And we had a 5-piece group and a 3-man crew. And the conversion van had 5 people from the band and our road manager in it. And our equipment and the other 2 crew members were in a Ryder cube van, a 15-foot cube van. We went everywhere in the world. And we played smaller venues and we sold tickets and we made pretty good livings. And we just had a ball. We just had a ball. But you could see that it wasn't going to go. The popular culture has a stopwatch. You get your first blast where you are in vogue, then you fall off the cliff and you're out of style. And then if you're good and you can still get it done, you can kind of crawl back in and have a career sort of behind the big top, sort of a sideshow, which we were in the 80s. And then if you hang around long enough, you come back into style.
That's right.
Sort of came back into style along with those other bands in the 2000s. It started to come back. And in the meantime, when I left the Outlaws in 88, I think New Year's Eve of 1988, 89, I took a year off. I bought and renovated a couple properties in Sulphur Springs and, made money and stayed at home and just didn't do anything musical. And then I decided I was going to go to Nashville and I was going to plant my flag. And I started commuting back and forth from Tampa to Nashville, which is about 700 miles. And it'd take me a day to get up there. So I'd drive up on a Monday. I'd write Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I'd walk out of Nashville. I'd get back in the truck Friday afternoon to drive back to Tampa with 3 or 4 songs, maybe 5 songs. And I'd go home and I had a studio in the upstairs of my home in Sulphur Springs. And I'd sit up there and I'd put down a drum track and a bass track and a rhythm guitar track and a lead vocal and 2 harmony vocals. And a friend of mine would come over and play some lead guitar and mandolin on it. I'd get these really mixed down right, and I'd go back to Nashville with 3 or 4 new songs and plunk them down on my manager's desk. And he would play them for at that time, the head of Arista Records Nashville. And he loved me. He loved me in the Outlaws. He and I were the same age. I was a younger version of our age group because I was really fit. I used to run and, really took care of myself, which I still do to a degree, but I was I was prepared for the opportunity that presented itself. And I got signed to Arista at the age of 43, which would never happen today.
Wow.
And put a group together with Van and Dave, cut that first album, put it out there, triple platinum,
Wow.
3 million pieces. The Outlaws sold gold. They sold gold records. They had 500,000, 500,000. We were popular and we were successful. We weren't successful like that. And
Well, Blackhawk was successful nationwide and worldwide, where Outlaws were probably just a kind of a local type sound, right?
yeah, well, the Outlaws were national, but I mean, you couldn't compare the numbers. The Outlaws were
Yeah.
more of a cult band, but Blackhawk was more of a hit radio staple. I mean, we had a dozen hit records in the course of a decade.
Now,
And
when you're started, are you really conscious of your sound, Henry? When you like form a new band, you don't want to take the old sound with you, or you want parts of it, or how's that go?
yeah, well, you have to, like, I was inspired by,
No koozies.
hold on, what's that, Hank?
We don't have that box of koozies.
Oh, but like, I was real inspired by Steve Earle. Steve Earle had released a record called Guitar Town.
Yeah.
And it had some sneering, nasty, musical and lyrical uh, components to it that really lit my candle. I love Steve Earle. I wanted to come to Nashville and be a sassy rock and roll. And so I met Van Stevenson, and he was writing these incredible songs. His demo reel sounded like outtakes from the Eagles. And I was a huge fan, and I was in awe of him as a writer and singer. And so he and I would write together, and then Dave would join us and write with us. And we'd go demo those songs, and they were like, whoa. They were like, it went from being some sassy little countercultural character to being mainstream radio incredible. And we could hear it. We knew we were on the right track. And so when we signed with Arista, and it was understood that I would be the lead singer and Dave and Van would be vocal components in this 3-part harmony group, that we had all these great songs. And that first record was magic. And it was soulful and it was so uniquely crafted. And it didn't sound like anybody. This is before the Dixie Chicks, I mean, that we were kind of like a male version of what they came along behind us and did. And we weren't country like country lifestyle. We were writing pop songs. Goodbye Says It All every once in a while, Just About Right, Sure Can Smell the Rain. And so, every record we had these really great songs. And radio, they played us. They reluctantly, to a degree, played us because it wasn't mainstream country. But the fans, radio was helpful. It was absolutely completely like mandatory to be on the radio. And we got on the radio and we had, high chart records, and we were an entity on the landscape, but we were still a little bit left to center. And people that didn't like country music loved Blackhawk. So our audience today is, believe it or not, it's like 15 to 45-year-old men and women,
Wow.
equally divided.
Wow.
Young audience, and they just flip over the band. And they love the band because it wasn't, cowboy,
Right.
country.
No more cowboy boots and cowboy hats, huh?
Yeah, but it was just different, and it still is different. And when I constructed the show, when we put the show on out there, it was very fast paced and very rock and roll. We went out and got after them. And I mean, we were running rings around Tim McGraw. And it took about 20 minutes to see what we were doing. And next thing you know, he was doing it. And
That's
just,
great.
How do songs end up in your head? I mean, what is how do you go? Do you have a process where you start to want to get creative, or does it just happen to you at times?
no, I mean, it's usually a thought, like Gray Ghost. The title cut of the first Henry Paul band record is a good example. Gray Ghost was a nickname that was part of John Mosby's Civil War character as a cavalry officer from the Carolinas, and he was very famous. And I thought it was a cool metaphor to take this color gray and this vapor that was left from Ronnie Van Zant's death and create this character or this song based around a Confederate cavalry officer and a singer in a very popular Southern rock band, so that it was Southern. It didn't promote the Confederacy. It was just a name, and it was just a really, really strong metaphor. I mean, I'm playing with Johnny Van Zant tonight, his younger brother. Johnny will tell you right now that Gray Ghost is his all-time favorite song that was written about his brother. It's a really good song. In Blackhawk, when we would write like every once in a while, about a high school girlfriend, and does she ever think about me? Well, every once in a while, which is tongue in cheek because she really misses what that was. Hang on, I want to make sure. The in Canada, you have to use your mobile phone as a modem.
Yeah.
Because the local internet thing is totally crazy.
Yeah.
When you're a songwriter, like for instance, I wrote a song on a more recent Outlaws album called "It's About Pride." And the second verse is, "The walls of the Fillmore still echo with the sound, and midnight rider memories forever haunt this town. From fire on the mountain to the voice of can't you see, the reason Sweet Home Alabama means so much to me is it's about pride." And it was about pride in our own band. In Gray Ghost, the second verse was very prophetic. You'd spend all this lifetime chasing your dream and trying to be somebody and do what you set out to do. And you turn around and look and your kids are growing and you miss the whole thing. So the fast life and the music is just a grim disguise for the heartache and the fear of growing old without the ones that mean the most. It makes you realize that you're the one that's left out in the cold.
Right.
You're so busy doing what you're doing that you turn around one day and your son is 45 years old. And so there's a bit of a misgiving in some of that, a little bit of a.
Right. Being in front of a live crowd is one of the most addictive things there is. It's just this incredible rush. You're still performing. You're still out there hitting this night out. You don't have to, but you choose to because I guess I would assume you still enjoy it. Do you still enjoy it as much as you did?
I did, that walk up those steps.
Yeah, going through that curtain.
I'm married to a young woman. I have a 10-year-old and a 4-year-old at home.
Wow.
Wow. You're a hell of a man.
Well, men will say that about, other men because you know what comes with the territory.
Yeah.
And, you're only as good
At home.
as are useful.
Been there,
That's
done
right.
that, Edward. Been there, done that.
But that coupled with the fact that I'm out here playing 120 shows a year, and it's
Wow.
it's not an old man's job. It's a young man's game still.
Right.
not a
Yeah.
young man, but I have plenty in the tank. And I can still get up there and I know what it takes. And I always get what I want out of the evening because I invest a lot of myself in it. We tell the truth. We tell stories. We don't bull, run a line of bull crap up there. We're very honest. I am as a front man, by now I've got incredible stories that they all want to hear. And it's kind of like this book, people are buying the book
Yeah.
because they want to know about what it was like.
The
And
Last Outlaw.
And that's what I was going to ask as a last question, because you've been so generous with your time, was the Last Outlaw. You got all these great stories, and people love hearing these stories because these stories sound like fiction, but they're not. It's
We always rib it. We always rib it. If we tell our friends, some of the road stories that all of them think we're liars,
That's right.
So
They don't believe
you can back that up.
well, it was a choice, you made long ago. And some of your friends made a lot more money than you being, insurance salesman or, in a corporate role. And they had really good insurance and they drove really nice cars and they lived in a really nice home. And then there was the artist in me that didn't have any of that, that did well as a wage earner in the marketplace, but didn't have, I never had the big house. I never bought new cars. I was smart with my money and I just lived a very comfortable but modest life. And they're gone and you never knew they were there. When I'm gone, I'll have a book. I have this children's book that's coming out. I have 40 or 50 record albums with songs on it. At least there'll be a part of me left. And I don't know what that's worth really, but to me it's kind of a reward for the sacrifice.
Yeah.
And to me, it sounds like you still really have that passion to get out and perform in front of this audience and these young guys, this younger audience now, and bring them up back to some of your history there, and having that passion. I mean, we all traveled on the road 100 days in a row, and that's miserable lifestyle out there. Do you still have that passion? I mean, after you've been on the road for a while, you're off for a week or so. Yeah, here comes the call. I gotta catch a plane. Do you still have that passion to get on planes?
Well, the fear of failure is pretty powerful.
Yeah, isn't it?
Yeah.
You
That
don't
keeps
walk.
us all going. I think that you hit on what the main point is, all of us.
I'm at the Saddle Dome in Calgary tonight with Leonard Skinner. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to try and steal the show.
Awesome.
Yeah,
And
amen.
they're a great band, so they're going to be fine. But when people leave, they're going to say Skinner was great, but God, the Outlaws were freaking amazing.
Awesome.
That's what they're going to say, and I'm going to make sure they say that because I'm going to give everything that I have and everything that I know I need to invest in tonight's performance to get that, because that's what I came here to get. That's what I want. I want the money, and I want that pat on the back.
Right.
I want that pat on the back's important.
Yeah. Henry, thank you so much for joining us. You've been so generous with your time at Calgary. I've been at Saddle Dome as Mr. Brisco has many, many times. It's cool that you're this great rock legend and you're still rocking out there all the time. I love that about you, and can't wait to read your book, Last Outlaw. Good luck on that. But Henry, thank you so much for taking your time and joining us.
Thank you.
All right, guys, we'll go have a good day, good week, and just remember, for me, as far as I go, Tampa will always be my home.
And you were talking before we go out. I can tell you a little bit of local news here. Our Tampa Bay Rays are looking for a new home. One of the sites is the old dog track there in Sulphur Springs. They think it'll really add a lot to the neighborhood if they get that
I
passed.
hope it winds up there. I'm a big fan. They're not, they're hanging around. They started off really good, and they've kind of sagged a little bit. What are they playing? Just under 500, but
They're right at 500 now. I think we're a game over 500. We won last time, put us back a game.
You got a shot at the wild
Four
card. You got a really good shot at it.
Well, 4 games out of the wild card.
Yeah.
and you got to love the Rays. They make a lot of they make a lot of a great baseball out of a very little budget.
They do.
I love them. I go all the time. John and I both are huge baseball fans. But
And
thanks
they'll
so
whip
much,
them
Henry.
fast.
It's so good to have.
I mean, that team is scrappy. They'll get in it.
They are. They're a
It's so
tough
good.
team. They're fun to watch. They play baseball like you're supposed to play. They steal bases. They dive for balls. They play baseball like it's meant to play.
Clear the bench. They come out. They whip ass.
Yeah.
Got
Yep.
We
Well, Henry, thank you so
appreciate
much for joining us. Good luck tonight. I know you don't need it, but good luck tonight in Calgary.
Thanks, fellas. Nice talking with y'all.
Thank you.